I hardly like to remember the first and last time I ever took an Uber, as it was a fairly traumatic experience. I had just finished an 11-hour shift, and I had hardly gotten much sleep the night before. Even if I had a vehicle at the time, I'm not sure I would have chosen to drive myself home because of my level of exhaustion. Usually, I took a taxi home, but either the ones that drove past me that day didn't want to drive me, or they were all taken. So I chose to use Uber since my friends both raved so hard about it, practically preaching as if it were their personal religion. Well, in every few good experiences, there's a bad one. And this is where mine begins. Once my Uber arrived, I noticed it had no back license plate. But I didn't think much about it because, to be quite honest, I was a blink away from passing out onto the pavement, so of course I didn't think anything of it. The moment I sat in the vehicle, I noticed how irrevocably clean it was, especially compared to most of the taxis I had taken in my life. Another thing I noticed was how the man in the front seat never so much as took a glance in my direction. He even just sat there for a minute in complete and utter silence, unmoving. After that minute, I began to think that I had somehow, some way, gotten into the wrong vehicle, and I apologized. But once I did, the car started moving, so I relaxed a bit, assuming he may have just been waiting for a moment to get back into traffic. The last thing I remember watching was the bustling downtown area going about its business, until my eyes finally chose to flutter shut and send me into a blissful sleep. I woke up once the car hit a large pothole in the road, causing me to whack my head into the window fairly hard. The first thing that had alerted me to something being wrong was the fact that it was super dark out. When I got into the Uber, it was at least 3 at night. It doesn't get dark at that time of year till at least 4 or 5 at night. On top of that, the highway in which I didn't recognize was practically dead, which that in itself was a rarity. So I couldn't even begin to comprehend how long I had actually been out for. As I glanced out the window, I felt my heart sink into the pit of my stomach slightly. We were no longer inside the city. Instead, we were on a pitch black highway surrounded by dense forest, and I didn't live anywhere outside the city. I quickly began to feel the tingling sensation of eyes on me, causing me to turn my head to the empty seat beside me. Except, it was no longer empty. It was nearly too dark to see, but I was able to make out the shape of a dark, lanky figure seated next to me. The only part of his face that was lit up by the dim dash lights was his insanely wide eyes staring at me intensely. The way he looked at me gave me a sense of complete and utter panic. I was in a situation that I had never thought could happen to me. It was something that happened to other people. Never me. Excuse me? Do you happen to know if we're close to my destination? I questioned, trying to sound as calm as possible. Then, the man beside me continued to stare at me longer than any sane person would be comfortable with. He has other plans for you. A new destination. We're almost there. The man beside me stated in an unsettling tone. At this point, I was sure the man hadn't blinked a single time since I had awoken. The man's words quickly sent my already present panic into overdrive. The car was going nearly 100 miles per hour on the highway. In the middle of the night, my mind began to race as fast as the vehicle, grasping at any faint idea I could use to get me out of the car or out of this situation. If I jumped out of the vehicle and somehow didn't break any bones or end up dead, they would easily find me on the road. Plus, I had no clue where I even was. I have to go to the bathroom. Could we maybe make a quick pit stop? I said. The two men simply stayed quiet, practically ignoring my question, although it hardly seemed as though they had even heard me at all. The others will welcome you once he is done. He will welcome you. The man in the front seat finally spoke deeply. the vibrato and intent in his voice shaking me to the core. The moment a single vehicle finally drove past us, the light that filled the car was enough to help me see my surroundings better, giving me a moment to get a more clear look at the second passenger. The man beside me had fresh stitches all over his face. His top eyelids were stuck open, making his constantly wide eyes more understandable, but nonetheless unsettling. His entire face was like some sick sewing project, almost reminiscent of Frankenstein, but confined to the head rather than the entire body. You came to us for a reason. He will be pleased to make you like me. Like us. The man beside me said, beginning to stroke my hair and touch the features of my face. I began to shake under the stranger's touch as well as his words. His fingers were rough and disconcertingly dry. The sound of sirens from behind us let an overbearing rush of relief wash over me. But there was almost uncomfortable tension that felt upon the air. It felt as if something within the air was taut and ready to snap at any moment, as if the slightest provocation or a wrong movement could cause it to blow. Do you folks know why I pulled you over? The police officer questioned once he reached the car. No, sir. I don't believe I do. The man in the driver's seat said in a flat manner. Well, for starters, you were going nearly 50 over the speed limit. That, of course, isn't a huge deal as it is the highway and is not very busy at this time, but both of your headlights are burnt out. And, well, that's too dangerous to be on the road. I'm surprised I even caught you, it was so dark. The officer stated calmly, tapping his fingers against the car as he stared into the dark vehicle. The moment his eyes made contact with my own, I tried as hard as possible to convey my fear, to silently plead for help, without aggravating the two men in some way. I thought I recognized you. There's a warrant out for your arrest. I'm afraid I'll have to take you in, the cop says sternly, signaling me out. The men around me didn't seem to clue into the fact that he was talking to me, as I saw them both tense up at his words. The moment the police officer opened the passenger door beside me, I nearly began crying out of relief, but I refrained. The men behind me stayed uncomfortably quiet as the cop locked me up in cuffs. The now overly acquainted sense of unease and panic continued to fill me as I felt the man's eyes bore into my back. It felt like at any moment my chance at freedom would be taken away. That they would be armed and shoot my savior. Or me. But they did neither. Instead, they sat within the car quietly, just staring at us in a horrific trance-like state. Even as the cop began to drive away, I somehow felt their cold and unnerving stares upon my skin. The air was thick with tension, and no matter how far we got, their car never moved so much as an inch, which made me feeling even more so stressed than before, if that was even possible. How do you know I needed help? I'm a cop. I could recognize the look in your eyes from a mile away. I see it daily, he stated. Within seconds, I began breaking down in tears. Every emotion suddenly overwhelmed me. The man didn't say another word the entire ride. He simply let me cry it out. He even offered to watch my house for the night in case they came back, as I had given them my address. I of course said yes, even though I didn't sleep a wink that night. They never came back. They probably found another woman instead. The thought sickens and terrifies me. Maybe they never even left that spot on the highway. If that hellish car had never gotten pulled over, I don't even want to know what would have happened. I wouldn't have gotten my chance to escape the horrible situation I had found myself in. Be careful if you take an Uber, or any other service like it. And no matter how tired you are, don't fall asleep in the vehicle.